Why do we need a citizen-led housing sector? I could talk for hours about this. So I'm going to start by saying, number one, I think my generation and the generations coming after me, if it feels like we're getting fucked over in terms of housing compared to, previous generations, it's because we are. Housing is now completely unaffordable, even for, a couple who are both working. And apparently we live in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. There's plenty of money moving around. So we clearly have a really broken system. And, as somebody who has experienced working in the belly of the beast, like I've worked in the housing sector, in the private housing sector, in the UK and Ireland. Yeah, I'm aware how dysfunctional it is and how it's dominated by, a number of corporations whose business model is designed to extract as much profit as they can possibly extract from a piece of land for their shareholders. That is the model. And somehow, through the privatization of housing, which started in the 80s, led by Margaret Thatcher, and the deregulation of the financial industry, housing has turned into this kind of property asset, this financial asset. And it's like almost homes and land are essential to us as things like food and water. It's essential basics for life. And it's almost like we've turned things like water, food, land into this kind of commodity that we compete with each other over to extract wealth. And it's very through private property. And it's very effective because property is the most, and private property is probably one of the most powerful and creative, you could say, forces for extracting wealth between rich and poor, because it's a necessity for life. So if you have control over the land, you can demand from people whatever you want in exchange for that land, because they're going to give it to you because they've no other choice. And this is kind of left over from the feudal system, really. So property is an incredibly powerful tool. Private property is an incredibly powerful tool for extracting wealth from poor people to rich people, and it has always been that way, actually. And that was the tool of the British Empire. That was the tool of colonialism when they colonized Ireland. They abolished Brehon law, our indigenous legal system. In Brehon law, we had a really, really quite sophisticated egalitarian system for owning land and laws around the land. Everybody actually had the right to land. Even the lowest members of society had the right to a piece of land for subsistence, for shelter and for growing food. And I think this is something that we haven't really been told about history, is that really, the Irish history in terms of land ownership, the key tool of colonialism, they didn't just take the land, but they redesigned the system of land from a communal owned structure to privately owned land ownership. And once it was privately owned, it could be bought and traded from different countries. And then once you had private property, the rights of the landowner, he could do whatever he wanted to the tenant. The idea of a tenant was invented. Actually, before we were colonized by the British, when we were under Brehon law, there was no such thing as eviction. There was actually, that was something that was invented. And I suppose the British Crown abolished Brehon law in the 17th century and replaced it with common law. So I'm really fascinated in digging deep into things like why landlords have so much power over our lives. And I think especially as Irish people, we have a really special history about this, and it hasn't been really told in a way that's really yet relevant to where we are today in terms of our housing crisis. But essentially, I feel like our entire economy kind of is kind of based on threatening people with eviction. If you think about how much money is tied up in property, how much it's the biggest expense for most people, like your mortgage or your rent. And what makes these, the banks or the landlords so powerful is that through this law of, okay, we can evict you if you don't pay your rent or your mortgage, it gives them so much power. And I just think it's so fascinating that we actually had an incredible system in Ireland based on communal ownership of land. There was no such thing as eviction. You couldn't get evicted, And I have an incredible vision for a future system around land ownership where we have something similar, where we recognize that there is no such thing as eviction. Because, okay, you evict somebody, where are they going to go? They're going to go to the streets, or they're going to go to some charity. Like, we're all in this together. We're all in this together. Evicting people doesn't make any sense unless you have a vested interest that the way you make money is by extracting rent from someone else's labor. Like, someone else goes and does a lot of work, and your industry is just to take that, and whatever they've generated from their work, that the landlord just gets to take it, just because your name is on a piece of paper that you own the land. It doesn't make any sense. It's dysfunctional. It's a dysfunctional power relationship. And in all of these talks around, okay, what's the future of housing? How do we solve the housing crisis? I really think it's really important to deconstruct how we got here in the first place. And actually, for thousands of years, most human societies have owned land communally. It's only, actually in quite recent history, private property was invented. And it doesn't create sustainable societies. It creates, a huge gap of wealth, a huge gap between the wealth of the rich and the poor. And we're really feeling that now in Ireland. We're really feeling it. And in a way, we're in a really dire situation. Like, it's very, very stressful, I think, to be, to not have a home, very, very stressful. It's very hard to kind of build a life for yourself without a home, without roots. Like, I think in a way, like, we're kind of like a little bit biological, like we need a place to put down roots so that we can thrive. But I feel like the pressure cooker of this situation that we're kind of in is making us, is kind of, almost like the pressure that creates a beautiful diamond. It's pressurizing us into really waking up and becoming really much more creative about the world that we live in and how we create our habitats, the structures around human habitats, how we create our society. We really have to wake up. It's like the pressure cooker is on.